Hello, you nerds. I hear there's some misinformation, some misunderstandings, some miscategorizations of this archetype. I'd like to show you the taxonomy, use, and repercussions of Stax. Part 1. Yeah, I know. Stax as an archetype is a bogeyman of casual commander, a monster under the proverbial bed. Everyone knows it exists, everyone's scared of it ruining their games, so no one dips their toes under the bed just to see how badly it bites. Well, I'm the guy who lives under your bed. I want to tell you how Stax isn't actually any worse than the other players you sleep with. It's not a monster. It's more like the person who ends up sleeping on top of everyone else. First off, Stax decks can be poorly built, just like any other deck. The awful experiences people may have are often tied to stagnating games where no one can do anything. One player has a board of propaganda effects, a rule of law, 20 thorns of amethyst. Yeah, they clearly didn't intend to end the game very soon. I'm of the opinion that Stax isn't a game plan. It's an interaction suite. This video is not intended for competitive EDH. I do not play it. I am a casual player and I play casual decks. All of my experiences and anecdotes are from games with and against other medium-powered decks and at least semi-experienced players. Part 2. Stacks of what exactly? A common reaction to a rest in peace is to call it a stacks piece if you're playing a dedicated graveyard deck, and call it a well-placed silver bullet if you've only touched your yard once or twice. My purpose here is to give a detailed taxonomy of different kinds of stacks to improve the vocabulary of players on either side of the spectrum. One tenet of a stacks piece's definition is that they are preemptive control. Every counterspell, cast down, and beast within you can throw at the table's artifact deck is redundant in the face of a Stony Silence or a Null Rod. They are hyper-efficient and interaction magnets. The fact that they can affect a board before it has been developed is the main difference between a stacks piece and a control piece. Every time a player does something, they ask the table, "May I?" For every stacks piece, they have up to 4 different answers. No, not yet, not for long, and not like that. No, these are the hosers. They just stop you. From the aforementioned Null Rod to Draineth Magistrate, these cards are meant to fully prevent players from doing the thing. Annoying as hell. Not yet. Impediments to everyone's game plan. While they can be devastating to players with low resources, these cards are mostly meant to slow everyone down. Sphere of Resistance, Trinosphere, and Orb of Dreams are good examples. They also incidentally help in combo suppression, forcing players to wait at least one turn or pay at least 1 mana for otherwise instantaneous or free plays. A significant number of cards in this category are rule of law effects, allowing everyone to cast more or less the same number of spells per turn cycle, outside of certain circumstances, is a good equalizer, even outside of dedicated stacks lists. Not for long. These are the main offenders of Stax's bad reputation. Sure, no one likes facing down a collector oof with a board of rocks, but at least with oof you get to keep them around. Smokestack, part of the namesake, doesn't let you keep anything. With these cards, the players aren't prevented from doing anything specific. Instead, they're punished after the thing has been done. Smokestack just takes more and more of the board you developed, Archfiend of Depravity takes the creatures you just cast, and Storm Cauldron, Winter Orb, and Static Orb just cut your mana out from under you. Not like that. These pieces deny you resources across boundaries that are not easily delineated. The mana you pay is the same, the cards you draw are unchanged, the number of spells you cast isn't controlled, but there is still an obstacle in your way. The actions you take are not prevented so much as they are modified. Cards like Kudo and Humility will not prevent you from casting creatures, but they will change how those creatures look. Dueling Grounds doesn't directly stop you from attacking, Ubamask doesn't directly stop you from gaining card advantage, and Oppression doesn't directly stop you from casting spells. These types of cards don't deny resources in easy-to-track quantities. Category number 4.5 consists of cards which do not technically fit any of these categories, but are incorrectly and unfortunately categorized as stacks by their many victims. Given the question of "may I?" asked by any player, these kinds of cards respond with "yes and," which is distinct from genuine stacks pieces' refusal to allow certain things to happen. What exactly fits this mold? Any slug effect, any punisher effect, anything that gives you an easy way out of a normally ubiquitous restriction. This category has Smothering Tithe, Umbilicus, Mogus, Eidolon of the Grey Revel, Mana Barbs. The list is rather large. Because these cards' Staxy effects are either optional or damage-based, and therefore only apply under certain circumstances, they are not considered Stax cards. Norn's Annex does not equal Ghostly Prison, and the same with the Dash Hopes does not equal Counterspell. Part 3. Ill-formed, ill-intent, illegitimate. Poor deck construction is a problem. The tactics meant to prevent a deck from flopping are out of the scope of this video, so I'll just say play more removal and less solitaire, and keep going. Outside of the natural challenges that befall an aspiring deck builder, the 3 other decks at your table may or may not be equally tuned and cared for. This leads to a strange case of linear algebra to figure out exactly what went wrong or right in your last game. The question boils down to, was it my deck or was it yours? Under the strict gaze of a Stax-focused video essay, I'll start with the offending deck, the eponymous Stax deck. The big bad pile of cards that say no even before you ask. I'll elaborate later, but I will tell you now that this is a gross misunderstanding of how Stax works and how it should be used, abused, and ignored. Stax, like any other archetype, can be built poorly. Unlike other archetypes, it has a much worse impact if built like a pile of cards instead of a cardboard circuit board. If you play against a Merfolk deck running clearly suboptimal, unsynergistic dudes, they're still probably bringing the game's end closer every time they attack. A Voltron deck, whose commander now costs 10 extra mana, still has a game plan, however far away victory may be. If your game plan is slow down everyone else's game plan, you better have one hell of an exit strategy. Slowing people down with no ulterior motive or benefit is going to net you few friends and fewer victories. As such, the threat of a bad Stax deck always looms over every log piece I put in my lists, and it should for you too. They need to be purposeful, synergistic, and still put in work in scenarios where they aren't at their best. It's worse when the deck isn't built well, but the threat of becoming archenemy looms just as hard. It doesn't matter how much you suffer from your own luck, players will see an easy route to get ahead, and the only obstacle is your dead body not being dead yet. The crab bucketing mentality that players usually get helps absolutely no one. If a player understands that you, the Stax player, are impeding their game plan, it doesn't matter how many threats it unlocks, that Stax piece already has every piece of removal aimed at it. In short, Stax is not an archetype. It's barely a strategy. Don't use it like one. I'll tell you how you should use it later. Now that the topic of bad Stax lists has been covered, I like to aim my focus at every single other deck. Your deck is fine. Under normal circumstances, it performs well. You probably got all the main categories nailed down, and if you neglected one of them, that's a conscious choice. I'd assume that even if it needs tuning, or hasn't won yet, or even feels clunky, your deck has a route to perfection. Notice my disclaimer. Under normal circumstances. Humility is not a normal circumstance. Null Rod is not a normal circumstance. Uba Mask is not a normal circumstance. Stax makes you reevaluate your path to victory by first forcing you to route through survival first. Strange cards like those 3 change the game just enough to break some things, but not enough to completely rework it. If you depend too heavily on the resources they modify, you need to bring out your backup plan. A lot of decks don't have a specific plan for edge case scenarios. I know I build my decks with only 1 or 2 tempo-topping plays, so a contingency plan is never on my mind. The fact that players must form one on the fly is why I love Stax so much. The Spellslinger deck, who's just about to storm off with Gutter Snipe, instead has to bleed the table dry, turn by turn, just to get around the Archon of Emeria. The Artifact deck, with 20 rocks, can't activate any of them, so until the Null Rod is removed, those 2 22/22 constructs just have to beat face. That, I believe, is the beauty of Stax. All this is to say that maybe your deck can be more resilient too. You don't have to dedicate any slots to beating lock pieces. Just let your deck do more than one thing. That Hullbreaker Horror you used to combo, it's a 7/8 by the way. It can beat face. Part 4. Stax is interaction. That's just it. Stax is interaction. It's interaction at a massive scale. Many lock pieces are permanent adaptations of one-off removal. In the 1 mana slot, you could Spell Pierce or Mana Tile the turn 1 play, or you can drop down a Root Maze or Authority of the Consuls and delay that by 1 turn. A Fatal Push or Swords to Plowshares can obliterate 1 creature apiece, but Porphyry Nodes and Drop of Honey will do so every turn. Silence is one thing. Deafening Silence is 1 silence per turn. For 2 mana, you might Retrieve, Remand, or Memory Relapse a spell to force a player to use it another turn. High Noon and Aethersworn Canonist will do that to most second spells. Ancient Grudge and Naturalize can neutralize 1 pesky artifact, but a null rod or collector oof could shut off any number of harmful permanents. Calamity's Wake, or any number of graveyard hate cards, can keep reanimator players on their toes, but a Containment Priest can sever their legs altogether. Mana Leak and Counterspell can stop people from messing with your stuff, but a Defense Grid or Grand Abolisher can keep everyone out of your business permanently. All of these are overkill. That's undeniable. To advise people to play Oof over Naturalize is like saying, having trouble ending games? Craterhoof. No creatures, don't worry. Thoracle combo. It's more powerful, yes, but it's significantly less satisfying to everyone at the table. Why not replace removal with Stax? Why not replace card draw with tutors? Why not replace value with win cons? The best reason of all, you just don't want to. It's your deck, dude, it's not mine, you play what you want. Power is proportionate to pleasure, but it doesn't mean your opponents have to have less fun. That said, the power of these cards has warranted their heinous reputation. The substitutions I listed are never that simple. Neither Ancient Grudge nor Collector Oof will do much if there are 0 artifacts on the table. It's your choice what you want to answer, and how. Part 5. Synergy. Yes, that's right, synergy. There are reasons to put these cards on the table besides impeding your opponents. Sometimes a combo piece will do more than be a nuisance. There are numerous combos involving 1 or more locks, either infinite combos or straight up board stalls. Leyline of the Void and Helm of Obedience, Rest in Peace and Energy Field, Leyline and Bridge from Below. These all have the capacity to win games, and it's not just because your opponents can't touch their graveyards. The more impactful your combo pieces are outside of your combo, the sneakier it will be, and the smoother your deck will run. Even normal synergies are worth considering. Maybe Spreading Plague and Gods, maybe even Cunning Lithomancer and Waste Not. It's important to note that anything that synergizes with Stax will also probably be oppressive. The more important side of Stax's role in your combos is non-bows. It's very important that you don't step on your own toes while executing your game plan. Your opponents are already going to be bearing down on you for daring to play an Eidolon of Rhetoric, or otherwise ignoring it, neither of which is good for you. If it's important for you to cast the Eidolon before something else this turn, you may want to figure out which of those 2 cards is more important. In theory, the cards are symmetrical. In theory, the effects are symmetrical. In practice, they're both highly asymmetrical. Everyone's game is affected the same way, but you were the only one who knew these effects were coming. You, the deck builder, were the only one who built their deck with these things in mind. You will be affected least simply because you didn't overextend into whatever harm you present to the rest of the table. That's a valuable resource. Don't lose it. Part 6. The Aftermath. I'd like to title this section something like Politics or Staying Alive, but I am notoriously bad at both of those things. While I can't present methods for helping people believe what you want them to, I can present what they will already believe. I want to divide the player base into various delineations and give them all stereotypes, but the reality is that your deck will be seen as a threat to most people. Sure, inexperienced players tend to appreciate interaction less than veterans, and Spikes see a problem to solve while Timmies only see a problem. Johnnies might use it to their advantage, and Devorthos might not even be affected. These categorizations don't mean much when the intersectionality of MTG players makes them seem more like humans and less like life totals with blockers. I'm gonna be honest, I spent a while trying to write and rewrite this section, figuring out different angles to approach it, but the simplest way to view it is this. I have cards. You have cards. We want to play our cards. So if my cards say you can't play your cards, you're not going to be happy when I tell you what happens when you play your cards. Having your deck explained to you is already aggravating and pointless. If I explain how your cards are supposed to work under my new rules, it's still probably going to be aggravating since you probably either A, understand the interaction already, B, don't like being told how to play your cards, C, just forgot the extra rules I gave you, or D, any combination of those. Fortunately, understanding why your opponents dislike Stax is not necessary to figure out how to move forward. Simply put, you need to be protected. This probably seems obvious, since Stax is mutually exclusive with going fast, so I may as well double down on being slow. The proactive reason to protect everything is that the threat assessment of your opponents is warped. Normally, people assess threats based on direct opposition to them or their game plan. Since we're all here for Casual Commander, the casual part of their brain hitches a ride and assesses threats based off the threat they pose to the fun they have. Now you have 2 different fearful reactions to deal with. Convincing people you aren't a threat is not trivial. If someone sees you as a threat, It's common sense to eliminate the problematic effect at any cost to them, since any side effect appears manageable when compared to the thought of, oh no, I'm either going to lose or not have fun, or both. Too many times have I resolved a rule of law just to have multiple people spend several turns working out a way to remove it. Once it's gone, the next player in turn order spends 10 minutes storming off and wins. Those turns spent blowing up my stuff were turns they did not have otherwise. Yes, I always feel vindicated that I was right to have played that lock piece and extend the game's length 20 more minutes. However, if the rest of the table decides that watching the flounder player play solitaire for 10 minutes and lose is preferable to playing with my silly restrictions, then there must be something I'm missing. I'm just hung up on the fact that once someone wins, you can't keep playing that game anymore. I like this game, and I don't want to leave it just yet, so I'll try and slow it down so we all get to play the same amount of MTG. To give a concrete answer, how do you move forward after facing ire from casting some Stax piece? You don't. Your opponents do. They're the ones responsible for running enough interaction to stop you with, backup plans to kill you with, and opinions to convince you with. You already made your move, it's their turn to act. You already passed priority, you can only cast one spell per turn, remember?